things that we're going to do today is we're going to look at how we can pull together the mainframe as well as the distributed side as far as a mainframe Agile DevOps practice. We're going to be focusing on the continuous delivery aspect. So we'll be looking at a pipeline that picks up from where the developers left off. So the developers will be doing their continuous integration. So they'll be checking code after it gets checked in, the SCM repository that'll get compiled, maybe some string testing, some unit testing such as JUnits. The continuous integration portion will happen both on the distributed side as well as the mainframe. So when somebody checks into Endeavor, their code, their COBOL program will get compiled and link edited. So that's actually a continuous integration process that's already in place for Endeavor. On the distributed side, the developers will typically use something like Jenkins to monitor their SCM repository and go ahead and do the compile process once the check-in has been completed. Now, the compile process can use Meister, for example, to do the compile link edit, Maven, which is more of a static scripting process, or AND scripts or batch files, those types of things. But we like to automate as much as possible. So we recommend that on the distributed side that Meister is utilized to give you that seamless process from the developers check-in to a clean compile. So that's the continuous integration process. The continuous delivery process is where we pick up after the developers said, this is good. My code is completed. I'm ready to move from my development world into a QA or a production process. So the steps that we're going to be going through, and this is based on this CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise, gives us this pipeline view of our life cycle. So one of the first things that we'll do is we'll actually go through and rebuild the code. So the developers have done their build, they signed off. Now we're going to actually throw it over the wall so that another team, you have the separation of duties that is going to execute another build. Now this build would be the one that is a candidate for going into production. Once we do our build, what we want to do is we want to run some code coverage. Again, we'll rerun the static code analysis, and we may add on additional steps into our code cover piece, such as a security scan. So we want to look for any security loopholes. We're going to look for performance bottlenecks. Those types of tools are available for us to go through and look at the code after the build has been completed. Once that has been completed, we get a good code coverage success that will go ahead and publish the binaries that we've created out of our build process up to a artifact repository. In this case, we're using Artifactory. You'll see that we're pushing our builds up to a Artifactory repository, and these are all the past builds that I've run. In my example today, we're actually pushing mainframe components into our artifact repository. You don't have to, but we are doing this in order to package together the mainframe and the distributed side. With Endeavor, you can leave the artifacts on in Endeavor, and we can reference those as part of the deployment process. So you don't have to move them down unless you want to create a single repository for your artifacts. After we publish our artifacts to the repository, we're going to actually move and deploy those artifacts into our integration testing area. When we move into integration, we're actually doing deployments at this time. So we're actually pulling the artifacts, the binaries out of the repository and pushing them to the appropriate locations. So we'll be moving them from the repository out to the Linux components, out to the Linux server, the mainframe components out to the mainframe. After the deployment's been completed, we'll go ahead and run testing tools that test the functionality. So in our case, we're actually running a open source product called Selenium to test our web page. So we actually go out, run some tests against the web page, make sure that the web page is functioning correctly. After that testing has been completed, we know that we have a successful integration completed at that point. Now, instead of just having a waterfall approach where we have to go off and do approvals, in the continuous delivery model, you actually will then automatically promote your changes to the next stage of the life cycle. So in our case, we're moving up to QA. And when we go to QA, we actually go ahead and deploy again to the QA servers. We then also repeat our testing. So our automated test scripts run, validate what we have going on for QA. If everything's successful there, obviously we should automatically promote to production. Now, one of the things that you'll see that's different with Release Engineer compared to any other product out there is we have a calendar that we're going to reference for each one of these stages. So let's go ahead and look at the production calendar. So let me go out to our calendar. The calendar that we have set up for production, we have an event out here, and we've actually made our production environment locked down. So you'll see that during our deployment, we actually go out and check the calendar to see if the production environment is open for business. So I actually went out and froze production for today, so I can't allow any changes to come into production. So you can do this two ways. You can set it up so a calendar is basically closed for business. So you have to go and create new events that say I can deploy during this time, or you can have the reverse where the calendar is always open for business, and you can put in events that say I want to lock it down. What this allows us to do is, instead of having to go manipulate our Jenkins pipeline, what we allow is the end users to go ahead, whoever's managing production is managing when they're receiving updates to that environment through a calendar. So there's no need to go in and change any scripting and change any plugins, change any of the process. What will happen is you go out and work with your calendar and say when you're ready for a change. Now, each environment has its own calendar. So production has a calendar. QA here, you'll see that we have a different calendar view where I've done a deployment earlier today. I actually have future deployments scheduled for QA here. Let's go ahead and take another look at the calendar here. So I'm actually going to go to the application I want to deploy, and it's called Uptime Full Stack. And here you can see we're going to zoom into the calendar events for our uptime deployment. Scroll this over so I can get it all to fit. Whoa. So you can see that we're going to go into integration on the 6th, and then followed by an integration QA deployment, and then we also have a scheduled deployment for production on Saturday. So you could go ahead and schedule in the future the deployments as well. Like I said, the calendar is where you're going to have the control of what's occurring for your environment, whether something's ready to go or not go. So even though we have this continuous delivery pipeline coming along, moving through, we actually are controlling whether something can actually hit the environment based on the calendar. So this gives you a lot of control and a lot of insight into what's occurring with a particular environment. Also, based on the individual environment, we can actually go down and look at what's happening at individual servers. So I'm going to go into our integration environment, and I have 2 servers here that are associated with it. So sometimes you always want to know what has happened with a server when something got deployed. Here we're able to see that the current application that is on our server is called Uptime, and we have actually a database change for version 2. So we can actually go through and look at the history of when items were deployed. So you can see here for the mainframe server that we only have the load libraries and JCL have been deployed to it. Let me go to production. Production has a few more servers. So you can actually see when something was deployed. So this database change was made back in August to our production server. If we go back to Tomcat for production, we can see also that was deployed back in August. So if you ever need to know what the state of a server is, you can go look at it and you can see what applications are on it, when the applications made it to the server, and you can see the overlap. So if you say, okay, it was working, a couple days ago, what has changed? You can go and look at an individual server and see what components have been delivered to it. So it gives a very easy idea to see the changes made to an individual server. So let's go back to our workflow, our pipeline here. And we're actually going to kick off our pipeline, and we're going to go through our process. So I'm just doing this on demand. This can be scheduled, or it can be done on a trigger. So after an approval has been made, you can go ahead and trigger this process. So again, we're working with taking everything from that the developers have turned over, and we're moving that now into the integration. We're building it, running our code coverage, publishing it, moving it into integration. If that's successful with our testing, then we're going to move it into production, QA, and then production. So while that's building, we're going to go over to my mainframe. We're actually using Meister today, Meister for ZOS to do the build. So there's our COBOL program coming across. And we'll see here that we're going to end up with a few more load libraries and JCL libraries when we get to our QA deployment. So we'll come back and revisit our ISPF panel here in a second. So if we want to look at the logs for each one of these steps, we can go ahead and dive into the logs. One of the things that we can look at here is our archive. And so we are archiving our steps. Here's the actual updating and linking together our build between Jenkins and Release Engineer. And I'll show you that here in a second. So if we actually, right now we're in an integration phase. So if we go over to our application that we're working with, it's called Uptime Full Stack. If you look at our timeline here, you can see here we started our deployment just a few minutes ago. While that's running, let's go ahead and look at the details of what this is made up of this application. So an application in Release Engineer terms is a way to package together components. We have several components here. One component is for our mainframe. So let's go and look at the details of this component. So we have our load library and our JCL. Those are the two components that make up the mainframe piece of our application. Let's go back and we'll look at the other pieces. We actually are also deploying infrastructure as well. In order for the Linux side to run correctly, we actually need an infrastructure layer installed. And what I mean by infrastructure, it's things like Tomcat, your database like MySQL, Oracle. In our case, we're working with Tomcat and Postgres. So we start with a bare server that has a base install. From there, we actually lay down infrastructure layers such as Tomcat configure Tomcat, and once Tomcat's in place, we're actually able to deploy our WAR file. Also, we have a database that's needed. So we actually go and install Postgres, in this case, onto our Linux server. From there, Postgres is configured, ready to go, and then we actually do a database update. So in this case, for this application, we actually have several different pieces that are occurring. We have a mainframe component, we have infrastructure for Tomcat, we have our WAR file, we have a database infrastructure, and then we have our database updates. All this is packaged together, so we're deploying everything at once. We can take these applications and also we can actually build together a release. So at the release level, let me say new release. I can package together multiple applications at the release level as well. So we could drag out our customer service application or our uptime full stack, and we'll actually build together a release that allows us to deploy multiple applications at the same time. So let's go back to our application that we're working with. We'll look at our timeline. So you can see that our application was deployed to integration and then followed up our deployment to QA. So if we take another look from here, we can see we did build 80. We had our integration test. Then we had our QA test. Now for production, let's see what happened here. This is where we actually went out and checked the calendar to make sure if it was available. Remember, I blocked out the calendar for production for today. So this deployment was actually stopped. So as part of the continuous delivery process, we were able to control what was going through from start to finish in an automated fashion. So there was no human intervention as part of this. If we do need to add on human intervention steps, that can be manual steps can be placed into the process. So if you need the DBAs to go out and validate something or make like a table space change or a backup, you could put those manual steps in play as well. And the process will wait until they're completed. The DBA would let us know that they've completed their manual task, and the automated process would continue on from there. So let's look at some of the information that we gathered from this whole process. We have the files that were deployed. We have our full log of everything that occurred. So this first step is us checking out the mainframe components, delivering those up to the mainframe. The next step you'll see is we're actually going out to Ansible to do the infrastructure layer. So this is us laying down Tomcat and configuring Tomcat. Followed by that is we're actually going out and deploying our WAR file. So the WAR file has been pushed out to our recently configured Tomcat server. Next, we're actually executing Postgres install. So actually installing Postgres and configuring that. That's all the Postgres pieces. And then we're performing a roll forward on our server to Postgres. We're actually rolling forward. So one of the interesting things with the release engineer is you're able to roll forward or roll back your databases incrementally. And this not only includes the distributed side, but we could also work with DB2 on the mainframe. We would see that as just another target server that we would be applying incremental database changes. So we've been going through this whole process, going from doing our deployments all the way through QA. Now you can see our last good deployment to production was on September 11th. If I were to go and change our calendar and allow a production deployment, we would incrementally pick up all the database changes from September 11th all the way through today. So there'd be no need to figure out, oh, I need to run the deployment 70 for 73, then 78, 79, 80, all manually. Release engineer would go ahead and do that process for you. So you incrementally bring up your database to the correct version that you want. So this gives you the ability to roll forward or roll backwards your database, any version that you want. So you can, we call it version jumping. So you can jump from one version to another very easily. So let's go back into our log here. One of the things that I did, that I have at our component level, are defects. So let's actually go at each component. We'll dive into our components here. So at the component level, I can associate defects. In our case, I'm actually connected up. If you look at our general tab here, my bug tracking for my data that I'm using for my mainframe changes, as well as for my distributed side, is I have everything in GitHub. This can be split, so you can have some teams using different, one team using like Service Desk or ServiceNow, another team using Jira, another team using GitHub. And in my case, I have everything assigned for GitHub. Also, I've associated my Jenkins job. You can see our last build that we did was for build number 80. What this allows us to do is automatically assign and associate the defects that are coming from your bug tracking source, and we interrogate how the check-ins, your source code check-ins have been done, which gives us the association between a source code change and the bug that that change is for. So in our case, we can look at our defects. You can see here we have 4 defects for this one. If I go to the, let me go to my other one here, our uptime. You can see 3 separate bugs. Everything's hyperlinked, so we can go ahead and go right out to GitHub and see the details about the bug that we have going on here. Let me zoom this in so you guys can see this a little better. So right from your deployment, you're able to associate the bugs that this component is fixing. You can navigate to them. Also, we can go to the builds, like I said, and get to the build automatically. So like we were doing, here's the build log. So this is actually the Jenkins log that we executed for the build of this component. We can see where this component was deployed to. So we know that it went to, for build 80, we had multiple components. So we had the load lives and JCL and the uptime, that all went to the QA as part of deployment 116. And also for our integration, we went to a server called ZOS and our integration server, and that was for deployment 15. So you have the ability to navigate back and forth between the Jenkins pipeline as well as into, you know, how it was built, when it was built, the whole process that it went through. So all the steps you can navigate to, as well as knowing how everything was associated. Now, one of the things is you're looking at the changes at the individual component level. But let's say we want to see all the changes at an application level. What we'll do is we actually look at an application and we'll look at the defects, and we have everything rolled up. So you have a complete picture of everything that was fixed for this application deployment. Also at the application level, like I said, you can see where it was deployed to. Any future deployments that we have upcoming is all there as well. Let me look at our timeline. Anything that we do is recorded, so you have a full audit history. So we were looking at when I made our changes to our calendar. You can see where I updated them earlier today. and again our TRAN reports. But let's go ahead and go to our endpoints here and look at our build engines. Like I said, we have build engines that have been associated. So from here, I can actually go back and look at our continuous delivery pipeline inside of Jenkins. I can see our build number, which components were involved. So you can, this is listing all builds inside of Jenkins. So within a single dashboard, we're giving you a view into your continuous delivery pipeline. Also, we could go to, like I said, we can go into the Jenkins from there, and we can go from Jenkins the other way. So we can actually go into our detail log here, and we can see our artifacts, where they were, how they were archived, as well as we can get into our details from the artifact repository. So we can get into our general build information, our published modules from that standpoint. If you look at the log detail, we have that available as well. This is, again, the full detail of everything. So if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, all of that is recorded. Or you could look at it through the pipeline view. So at each one of these stages, you can look at the logs as well. So one of the things that we are going to give you is that whole process from start to finish, packaging together everything that we want as far as how an application is going to look. So one of the things that we have here is we performed some automated test scripts for Selenium. I can associate those test scripts. Right now, they're out on the server being run. But let's say I want to deliver those test cases as well. So what I've just done is I want to deliver our test cases. So test cases are usually some sort of file or script that need to be executed against our application. And when we do that, we want to test the application as a whole. So we want to test the mainframe side and the distributed side. So we want to test everything as a whole. When we do that, I can drag out a component for test cases. Now I've associated particular test cases to this version of our application. So if I have new functionality that I want to test, I can associate the new test cases with that new functionality. Now when the test cases are executed, we actually go ahead and deliver the test cases down to the testing server, execute them, and record the results as part of the deployment process. So we have that whole picture of what is happening with your application. We have associated the mainframe component, the infrastructure component, the developer component, more infrastructure, database changes, as well as the testing cases. All of that is associated in one big package that can work across not only the mainframe, but also the different databases that you have, as well as different distributed operating systems. Also, we can support, I would call them non-standard operating systems, such as AS400, ATM machines that typically run on a Tandem or OpenVMS type of machines. Also down to point-of-sale systems such as cash registers. So all of that, when you're looking at how everything is hooked together, you get that big picture view when you work at the packaging level. Now, when we're working with packaging at the mainframe, in this example, I brought everything into our Artifactory repository. We can interface with Endeavor, so as something moves through the life cycle, let's go back to our life. So when something moves from integration to QA and from QA to production, those would be Endeavor moves or promotes that would be performed. So as you package together on Endeavor, you would have a component still on the release engineer side that will refer to that specific version of your Endeavor package or package group that you want us to interface with, and that would allow us to go ahead and move automatically through the lifecycle your distributed components in Endeavor, your mainframe components in Endeavor alongside the components that are on the distributed side. And like I said, the distributed side doesn't have to be Linux. It can be Solaris, AIX, HPUX, Windows, and as well as all the like the Tandem nonstops. So if we had a Windows IIS server, we could actually pull that in as well. So you get that big picture at the packaging level with all the associated defects, all the associated jobs that were used to create the individual components, full traceability and auditability from both sides, the mainframe as well as the distributed.
Thank you for viewing our recorded demo. For more information, you can contact us at request-info@openmakesoftware.com. You can also visit our website at www.openmakesoftware.com for white papers and other demos on Release Engineer and Meister, our DevOps solutions.